PrisonPlanet.com. Gore, 24 hours of bullshit. Gore himself is a living example of how global warming alarmism is built on hypocrisy and pseudoscience. By Paul Joseph Watson and Alex Jones. PrisonPlanet.com. Wednesday, September 14, 2011. Al Gore, 24 hours of bullshit. Al Gore 2. Al Gore is set to launch his 24 hours of reality propaganda blitz this evening in a desperate effort to reverse increasing skepticism towards global warming alarmism, but the jig is up. Gore himself is a living example of how climate change hysteria is built on a platform of greed, hypocrisy and faulty pseudoscience. Polls show that increasing numbers of Americans are not falling for the hocus-pocus of man-made global warming, which is unsurprising given that Gore, one of its leading proponents, lives a lifestyle completely at odds with his own dogma. Gore's insistence that he is walking the walk, not just talking the talk, doesn't seem to extend to his own private life in the context of energy conservation and CO2 emissions, while lecturing the world about reducing CO2 emissions and saving energy. Gore's own mansion uses 20 times the energy of the average American home. In February 2007, the Tennessee Center for Policy Research revealed that the gas and electric bills for the former vice president's 20-room home and pool house devoured nearly 221,000 kilowatt-hours in 2006, more than 20 times the national average of 10,656 kilowatt-hours. These figures were not disputed by Gore. "If this were any other person with $30,000 a year and utility bills, I wouldn't care," said the center's president, Drew Johnson, "but he tells other people how to live and he's not following his own rules." As the leading luminary of the global warming movement, you would expect Al Gore to live up to the standards he lectures everyone else about, particularly in relation to population control. Gore recently called on women to access fertility management, abortion, in order to stabilize global population. However, Gore has 4 children of his own, who presumably enjoy the luxury of his $8.8 million seaside mansion in Montecito, California, absent any worries about rising sea levels. Gore is set to become the first carbon billionaire, but he offsets his multiple times the average power consumption by purchasing carbon credits bought largely from his own company, Generation Investment Management. Aside from Gore's own hypocritical lifestyle, the science behind man-made global warming is also being increasingly discredited, which is precisely why the former vice president feels the need to reinforce the myth of anthropogenic climate change, particularly as a mere 24% of Americans think he is an expert on the subject. Gore is completely wrong when he tells us that the science of climate change is settled. If his climate reality project actually did promote climate realism, he would tell us that the science is in a period of negative discovery. The more we learn, the more we realize we do not understand about this, arguably the most complex science ever tackled. Rather than remove the doubt, as Gore says, we need to recognize the doubt, writes Tom Harris. But that dogma is being contested by more and more reputable scientists who are finally speaking out in an organized fashion. For example, on August 29th, a blockbuster science document was published that totally refutes Gore and banned the interim report of the Non-Governmental International Panel on Climate Change, NIPCC, co-authored by a team of scientists recruited and led by climate experts Dr. Craig Idso, Professor Robert Carter, and Professor Fred Singer. The NIPCC shows that the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has ignored or misinterpreted much of the research that challenges the need for carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas controls. In other words, the science being relied upon by governments worldwide to create multi-billion-dollar climate policies is almost certainly wrong. Consider extreme weather, the main topic of 24 Hours of Reality. Gore promotes the concept that greenhouse gas-induced global warming is leading to increasingly severe weather, but this defies logic. If the world warms due to increasing greenhouse gas emissions, temperatures at high latitudes are forecast to rise most, reducing the difference between Arctic and tropical temperatures. Since this differential drives weather, we should see weaker mid-latitude cyclones in a warmer world, and so less extremes in weather, not more. Two of the primary pieces of evidence presented in Gore's inconvenient truth polemic have also recently been completely undermined by the facts. Gore's emotional appeal in his film that predicates on the ludicrous notion that polar bears are not strong swimmers and will drown because of melting polar ice caps has been vehemently discredited by new figures from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which show that the polar bear population is currently at 20,000 to 25,000 bears, up from as low as 5,000 - 10,000 bears in the 1950s and 1960s. A 2002 U.S. Geological Survey of Wildlife in the Arctic Refuge coastal plain noted that the polar bear populations may now be near historic highs, it read. In addition, catastrophic sea level rises attributed to man-made CO2 emissions, a claim repeatedly invoked by Gore, have also failed to live up to their hype in recent times. Data recorded over the last several years clearly indicates that sea level rises have slowed down and are now flat. All the king's horses and all the king's men, never mind a 24-hour TV borathan, cannot put the global warming myth back together again. Gore's 24 hours of bullshit will only serve to exemplify the flailing desperation of climate change doomsayers, as their dire proclamations are increasingly proven laughable by Mother Nature herself. This article can be found here, http://www.prisonplanet.com/l-gore-24-hours-of-bullshit.html. Paul Joseph Watson is the editor and writer for PrisonPlanet.com. He is the author of Order Out of Chaos. Watson is also a regular fill-in host for The Alex Jones Show.